Poor Panzer Dragoon. No one cares about you. This game is unique from the previous two since I had essentially zero expectations going in, since I only very vaguely knew what the series was beforehand. Starting out the game to give me a bit of background, with an opening cutscene explaining the plot. To sum it up, our character decides to explore a cave before getting attacked, and is saved at the last second by the Panzer Dragoon. But the rider is fatally wounded by the encounter, and entrusts our hero to stop the other Dragoon from reaching some evil base thing before we do. I didn't pay attention that much, but that was mainly since the cutscenes, particularly in the Switch version, seem to run at a pretty low frame rate, which takes a bit to get used to. Also, despite the better graphics, it still looks a bit off in the actual animation. This is likely due to the small team this game had, but honestly, comparing it to the original Saturn cutscene, it's still a huge improvement on the presentation. So I'll just eat my words and move on to the title screen. I really like the cracked stone around the logo, and the silhouette of the Dragoon that appears is also a very nice touch. Honestly, I have faith in this being good, so let's boot up a level and see how it plays. Starting at the first level, you get a look at the graphics, and honestly, it looks great. Well, you know, for a Switch game. And if you compare this to the original, it's a definite upgrade. The area feels so much more live and detailed. This game even features a photo mode, which is how you know they're proud of graphics, so I do appreciate the inclusion. Another thing you'll discover is that the game runs at a mostly consistent 60 FPS on the Switch version, which is a big positive for me. This does come at the cost of the resolution, but this is the Switch, so that's kind of a given. Second-party Switch games struggle to even reach a consistent 30 because Nintendo refuses to make a Switch Pro, and so you know what, I'll take what I can get at this point. There does exist a performance mode and a graphics mode in the options, but honestly, you have just as good of a guess of what impact it has on the game than I would, since I could not tell a single difference while playing. Moving on to the gameplay, this game is an on-rail shooter. You can think of series like Star Fox, which is very similar to gameplay-wise. But you see the series are very different. In Star Fox you fly around and shoot in a straight line in a spaceship. While in Panzer Dragoon, you fly around and shoot in a straight line, but you're a Dragoon. Also, it's not furry bait. No! Alright, that's not all that's unique to Panzer Dragoon. For example, you can look in all four directions rather than being locked to one. This adds an extra level of strategy to the combat, since you'll need to turn to account for enemies moving around you. Although this is mainly useful during boss fights and isn't actually used that much during the actual levels. Nonetheless, it's a really interesting mechanic that adds some minor depth to the gameplay. Another thing I really like about this game is that it's challenging. If you don't pay attention, you'll likely die a fair amount in some of these stages. I barely beat some of these stages by the skin of my teeth, and I was playing on normal. I'm not sure whether or not this was because of the actual game design or because the charge shot is a useless mechanic against tougher enemies, but it was nice having to learn how to utilize the mechanics at my disposal and actually overcome a threat. As you may be able to tell, I like this game a fair amount, but not everything about it works. Starting with one that I already mentioned, I found that the charge shot is a lot more useful against the smaller enemies in Panzer Dragoon, since you can lock on the more than one enemy at once, which you can't do in Star Fox. Although for the most part, it's actually not that useful against the boss enemies, which makes those much harder as a result. A lot of the time, I find that I can do more damage just by using the normal shots fast enough. So when I play, I end up setting my controller down and using two fingers on the shooting buttons like I'm playing an arcade game. Another thing I found to be really odd are the gyro controls. If you don't know already, I like to use gyro aiming in Switch games when available. I think it's a really good mechanic, and I think it adds a lot to console shooters in general. So when I saw it in the options menu, I obviously turned it on. Unfortunately, the thing I found is that the motion controls don't work correctly at all. Instead of moving the cursor in a smooth motion like you would expect, it's just straight up broken. This game seems to try to emulate D-pad movement or something, I don't know. I've tried to use multi-controllers, but no, it's just broken. This is actually footage of me trying to use the motion aiming. This isn't the biggest deal breaker in the world, but it is a clear mistake that I find odd. I guess you would have to go with the Steam version to use proper gyro, which is a huge shame. Another thing that bothered me is that there isn't any way to dodge. Alright, that's not entirely accurate. There actually is a way to dodge, but only when you're in low health. But nowhere in the entire game are you taught this. No hint screen message, no tutorial pop-up, not even in the control screen. You were expected to figure it out on your own, which sounds kind of dumb when you think about it. Hiding mechanics like this is a secret. Granted, this isn't required to beat the game, but not knowing this does make the game more difficult, so it's a bit scummy to not hint towards it in any way. I had to find out through the Nintendo Switch news section, which is not how your players should have to figure out mechanics like this. The biggest, most glaring issue with this game, however, is the length. This game only has 6 levels, and they aren't particularly long either. You could probably beat the whole thing in about 2 hours, and for the $25 asking price, that could be considered a bit steep for some. This game does soften the blow with a bonus mode you unlock after clearing the game called Pandora's Box, which allows you to select any level you want and play it with a few modified settings like faster speed or infinite health, which is a nice distraction, but ultimately the game's length is its biggest flaw by far. If I'm being honest, I do like this game, but I don't love it. There was a lot here to enjoy, especially if you like games like Star Fox to any extent, but the short length and the other issues I mentioned brings this game down. I will still recommend this one despite its issues. Although the official Panzer Dragoon Twitter account hinted at a Panzer Dragoon 2 remake releasing, so hopefully they can fix all the issues with this remake in the next one. Editor's note, it's been a little bit since the first game released, and we still don't have an update on the sequel, so I guess take that information with a grain of salt.
Class C license. You don't belong down here. You better try it again.